My name is Bill Dennison, and I'm with the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. And our group of scientists have been producing Chesapeake Bay report cards for the last 6 years, annually. This group of scientists is led by Caroline Wicks, who's going to be speaking a little bit later, providing some details about this year's report card score. EcoCheck is a partnership between NOAA and the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. Also, Nick Pascal, the director of the Chesapeake Bay program, a federal and state partnership based in Annapolis, is also going to talk about some of the government responses to these report card scores. I'd also like to acknowledge some important contributors and participants here today. Dr. Bob Summers, the Secretary of Environment for the Maryland Department of Environment, is here. He's been involved in the implementation of sewage upgrades throughout Maryland and has been an active participant in the Governor's Bay Stat panel, which embraces and uses this report card. We also have Dr. Russell Hill, because he's the acting director of this magnificent structure we're standing next to. This is the Institute of Marine Environmental Technology. And a couple of really interesting things about this institute. First of all, it's 3 universities together in a consortium. The University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, the University of Maryland Baltimore County, and the University of Maryland Baltimore. And Russell leads a group of very clever scientists and graduate students who are using modern technology to help solve environmental problems. They have a wonderful aquaculture closed system in the basement. They have tremendous resources and are active participants in this endeavor of improving Chesapeake Bay. We also chose this particular location, this park, which is going to officially open on May 6th, and I invite you to come back for that event. This is a pretty park, but it's also very functional. It's a stormwater retention and percolation device. So the stormwater that collects from the roofs and the pavement from around here goes into this recharge. The groundwater protects the bay from direct runoff of litter and sewage and material that comes off the roads. So this is an effort that's led by the Waterfront Partnership. Lori Schwartz is the executive director, sitting on the wall over there. Adam Lindquist is out and about here. And these guys are doing some impressive things in Baltimore with the goal of being fishable and swimmable harbor by 2020. The Waterfront Partnership is also on Friday going to set out 2,000 square feet of floating wetlands. You can see a little bit of that floating wetland over by the aquarium now. So there's some active, exciting things happening in Baltimore Harbor, and it's great that we could launch this Chesapeake Bay report card here in Baltimore. The other thing we're going to try today for the first time is we're live streaming this over YouTube. So we're hopeful that those of you watching can see and hear us well enough. Thanks to Jonathan Kellogg for organizing that. And we'll try to archive the webcast so you can watch it later. Another novel approach to this year's report card is we had a photo contest. And what you see here are the winners and runners-up of the photo contest for the cover of the report card. The photo here of a bald cypress swamp in the upper reaches of the Nanticoke River in Delaware demonstrates the diversity and relatively pristine nature of some of our waterways in the Chesapeake Watershed. The second place, and the winner of that was a guy called Benjamin Reed. The second place here we have in attendance, this is a photo by Jim Kidd of Town Creek near Oxford, showing these iconic watermen in this beautiful, you've got a sunrise, Jim? Sunrise in Town Creek off the Chesapeake River on the eastern shore. So Jim, if you could come up, I'll give you a a certificate of your award, and the check will be in the mail. There was a cash prize for future reference. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Jim said that the one bad thing is he can't enter it in the now that it's been a winning contest, he can't enter this photo in the fall competition as well. But also we had 2 third-place photos. This photo here in southern Dorchester County is a dramatically depicts the vulnerability of Chesapeake Bay to climate change and sea level rise. That's a road that's underwater. That photo's by Danny Post of Elliott's Island. And then finally, this photo here of the great blue heron perched on a log floating just south of the Bay Bridge in the main stem of Chesapeake Bay. And this is a really important photo for what happened last year. 2011, we had some major runoff events in the spring and then later associated with Tropical Storm Lee. That tree that heron's standing on probably came from Pennsylvania. It floated down the Susquehanna with the water. So that's the cover, and that's exciting that we were able to illustrate it with some great iconic photos of the Chesapeake region. The report card itself. This year, the Chesapeake Bay report card was an overall D+, or the second lowest score that we've recorded since we started calculating the scores back since 1986. 2003, another year of extremely high flows, was the only report card score that was worse. And this says it's obviously not good news for Chesapeake Bay. And it comes in spite of some very positive efforts in terms of restoration that Nick is going to address in a few minutes. The report card scores range from 3 Cs in the lower bay, upper western shore, and upper bay. These two are traditionally been in the B category and typically in the best condition of the bay. To the worst, and this year's worst, was Elizabeth River and the Patuxent River, not the Patapsco Back River, which is actually one of the few places that actually improved last year. Only 2 out of the 15 locations actually had a better score. And so the question comes, what accounts for those poor scores? And I'm going to let Caroline Wicks explain this through this conceptual diagram here, but essentially it's a sequence of events that led to this score, starting with the spring rains we had last year, continuing with a long, hot, dry summer, and then punctuated with 2 storms, Hurricane Irene, and we were over here in the Marriott running a conference that Bob Summers helped organize with a Japanese contingent from the Closed Margins of Coastal Seas conference, and we had some flooding and some issues getting here and starting the conference, but we pulled it off in the end. And that actually then preceded the major event for Chesapeake last fall, which is Tropical Storm Lee, which of course was when the Conoco Dam opened and was the 3rd highest flow recorded. So I'm going to let Caroline go through those details, and then we'll hear from Nick's response. Caroline?
Hi, thanks, Bill. As Bill just mentioned, the Bay received a D+ in 2011, which is lower than last year's grade. The nutrients and sediments flowing into the Bay affected health in the following ways. First, water quality got worse. Low dissolved oxygen conditions were expected during the summertime because of the high spring flow that we saw. And you can see over the conceptual diagram, you have high nutrients and sediments coming in the springtime, and it creates low dissolved oxygen conditions. And then this continued through the hot, dry summer. And then in August, with Hurricane Irene, the winds from Hurricane Irene actually mixed the bay up and improved dissolved oxygen conditions. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been. Unfortunately, water clarity scored a 5% in 2011. That's the lowest score on record. It's the lowest score in the last 25 years. And it was bad, it started out bad in the springtime. It continued to be bad in the summertime. You can see the chlorophyll A that was high in the summertime, and the sediment, the turbidity, meant that there was bad water clarity throughout the summer. And then tropical storm Lee certainly didn't help and continued to have very murky water in this fall. So for the whole year, water clarity was bad. Very poor water clarity is a serious problem for the bay because it affects so many plants and animals. Aquatic grasses, also known as submerged aquatic vegetation, is an important plant in the bay, and it protects blue crabs and striped bass and other animals. It also is a nursery ground for baby fishes and shellfish. Another way in which the sediments and nutrients flowing into the bay in 2011 affected the bay was directly through aquatic grasses and benthic community. Aquatic grasses did decline this past year. This was in the upper bay, such as the Susquehanna Flats. This was mostly due to the poor water clarity and Tropical Storm Lee, just making the water very turbid. In the southern portion of the bay, however, where eelgrass is the main aquatic grass species, there was a very high water temperature in 2010, which caused a die-off of the aquatic grasses in late 2010, and they didn't recover in 2011. Benthic community, that's the clams and worms and critters that live in the soft sediments of the bay. They decreased in 2011, and it'll be really interesting to see how the sediments that came into the bay during Tropical Storm Lee have settled on the bottom and affected these communities, and it'll be interesting to see what the score is in 2012. So just remember that 2011 was a tough year for the bay health-wise. We hope to see some improvement this coming year. If this dry spring is anything to show, there's less nutrients and sediments going into the bay right now, and less pollution is always a good thing. So we'll see how it goes next year. Thank you.
So now we get to have Nick Pascal from the director of the Chesapeake Bay program. He's been on the job for 8 months. This is his first report card. So welcome to Chesapeake Bay, Nick, and you got your work cut out for you.
Well, I attended parochial schools for elementary school and high school, and I don't think D+ was a passing grade. It obviously means we've got a lot more work to do. First, let me express my appreciation to Dr. Dennison for the invitation to come here and address you and respond to the report card. I think the annual report card gives us a glimpse at what's happening in the bay and keeps us on our toes in terms of the impacts that weather-related events or other types of human events can have on the bay ecosystem. This year's report card certainly indicates that severe weather events can have an adverse impact on the bay. However, I think there's room for optimism when you look at some of the long-term work that's been done and some of the long-term indicators that we look at. One of those was a study actually that was done by Johns Hopkins and UMCES, which looked at 60 years of water quality data, and that's a pretty good record to be taken a look at. And the conclusion that the study came to was that the frequency and duration of dead zones in the bay over that period of time had actually decreased as a result of measures to control and reduce nutrient runoff. So I think that's a very positive indication. There was reference made to Susquehanna Flats, and when the storm, Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee were occurring, and we had just been up to the Conowingo Dam and had an opportunity to get over to the Susquehanna Flats. Most of us had thought that basically the flats would be toast. We thought that the releases from the Conowingo Dam would have a dramatic effect on the Susquehanna Flats, and we were very surprised and very encouraged to see that it went through basically unscathed. There was a little bit of a scouring that occurred, but essentially 95% intact. And I think what that does is indicates, to me at least, and to others at the Bay program and in the scientific community, that we're starting to build resilience back into the bay ecosystem. The bay ecosystem was resilient to begin with. A lot of that was lost because of human activities and development in the watershed. Some of the work that's been done over the past 25 to 30 years is starting to rebuild that resilience back into the system, and I think that's an extremely important indicator. But we are approaching what I believe to be a really critical time in the bay restoration effort. I think, as some of you know, the EPA, along with the states and the District of Columbia, a little over a year ago, and it doesn't seem like it's been in effect, it seems like it's been in effect for a long time, we implemented what's referred to as the pollution diet, or the TMDL, the total maximum daily load for the bay. And essentially that's a measure of how much pollution a water body can withstand and still meet its intended uses. And the contributions that we've been making over the years in terms of nutrients and sediment far exceed what that assimilative capacity of the water body is. And this is for the entire stretch of the watershed. 64,000 square miles, 17 million people. It's a very large, very complex, and very dynamic ecosystem. And it's huge. And things that happen in that watershed are going to have an impact on the bay and other water bodies. But what the TMDL did, or the pollution diet, was put mandatory controls into effect. Essentially what the states and EPA have agreed to is undertake a number of measures that will reduce nutrient contributions and sediment contributions to the bay. A critical deadline was the submission of what we refer to as the Phase 2 watershed implementation plans. The final plans from the states and the district were due March 30th. We've gotten responses from all the states. They've responded to some of the comments that we provided to them in their draft submissions, and we think we're in the process of reviewing those final documents now. We think that a lot of the concerns or a lot of the issues that we raised in our comments will be addressed in the final plans. But the critical point is the fact that we need to move now from planning to implementation. A lot of good work has been done over the years in terms of reducing nutrients and reducing sediment loadings, but we really have to kind of ratchet up the game a little bit. And the Phase 2 watershed implementation plans and 2-year milestones are designed to do that. Now we move from planning to implementation, where we actually start putting more of these measures into effect. And we're going to be checking in every 2 years to make sure we're making good progress on implementing those measures. We want to have 60% of those reductions taking place by 2017 and 100% by 2025. And based on our calculations and simulations, if 100% of those measures are put into effect, we will restore water quality in the bay. It's not going to happen right at 2020. It's going to take some time after those measures are in place to see the results, but we feel confident that that's going to happen. I've traveled in the 8 months that I've been on the job. I've traveled around the watershed. I've talked to local elected officials. I've talked to watershed organizations, environmental groups, and the one message that comes across very clearly is we're ready to go to work. We're ready to do this. We're ready to get the job done. And I think from this point forward, with the assistance of the federal government, state government, and implementation mainly at the local level, we're going to be able to achieve that objective. The report card gives us a snapshot in time, but we also have to look at the long term to measure our progress, and we see a number of very positive indications. Really appreciate the work that the Center has done and EcoCheck in terms of bringing our attention to these important issues, and now we just need to move forward and get the job done. Thank you.
There are a couple of things I want to point out associated with this report card that you can get copies over there on the side. One is that we think that it isn't just up to government to do it. This is something that we all can contribute to, and we call it living bay friendly. There are a bunch of things in particular that we recommend based on this water clarity issue that Caroline was talking about, the turbidity of the water. So we can do a lot to reduce the amount of runoff that we get, not just through these large public structures, but also in your backyard with rain barrels and rain gardens, etc. So have a look at that. Also, this report card, these grades are based on scientific data collected by hundreds, probably 200 people involved in the collection, analysis, interpretation of this data. Scientists throughout the watershed that are involved in this. And so this data you can drill down on the website that's listed in the report card or on the bottom of this poster. There are over 200 web pages with maps and graphs that go into detail about different regions and different indicators. So you can go and investigate this in more depth, as well as some links across to the Bay program about more things you can do to be involved. You can join watershed groups. One of the exciting things we've been doing lately is partnering with groups like Lori's Waterfront Partnership and Blue Water Baltimore here, of riverkeeper and waterkeeper groups to figure out ways to develop more specific, more geographically detailed report cards. We call this loose association, the Mid-Atlantic Tributary Assessment Coalition. And so we're working at a variety of different levels, from the broad overview of the Bay to the more specific stream-by-stream analysis. So you can access all of that material through this web link provided here. So I'd like to thank you and close this proceedings off. Sorry, go ahead, advertise.
It's not an advertisement, and I'm not a political creature, so this doesn't come naturally to me, but I think it's important to recognize the efforts of the governor and the General Assembly this year. There was a legislative package that most of us didn't think was even going to be a smidgen of it implemented, but there were 4 pieces of legislation that were implemented that are going to be huge in terms of Maryland's effort to move forward and build on the successes they've already had in terms of restoring the Bay, and we're hoping that the other states will do likewise. Most of those other jurisdictions, their General Assembly is still in progress, and we hope that there are some positive outcomes that result from that as well. But Bob, to you and the administration, just a great job getting a lot of good legislation passed.
We have record cover crops as well. Bob's worked on the sewage upgrades that are ahead of schedule in many cases. We've got record cover crops with the Department of Ag in Maryland. It's going to take a couple of years for that to be manifested in changes in water quality in the Bay, but those are the right things to be doing. Stormwater, increasing the stormwater, the sewage flush fee gives Bob more money to accelerate those sewage upgrades, and when we've seen the improvements in the upper parts of the tributaries, we can see very dramatic and very fast responses. So the Bay is resilient, as Nick was saying. It can do wonderful things if we give it a chance, and I think the kinds of measures we have underway are very positive. So we're really looking forward to seeing this report card improve. We hope very much that this has been the worst report card score that we'll record. We think already this year is very promising. The grasses are looking good. Hasn't had a lot of rain, not a lot of sediments and nutrients into the Bay. We're very cautiously optimistic about this summer, and so we're really hopeful that we're going to end up with a better report card when we come back in a year. So thanks very much.